Hi everyone, this is Rohit from Lifestyle Master here, and today I'm excited to have Indus Khaitan, who's the founder of Quolum, a SaaS and cloud spend reduction product funded by Sequoia and Nexus. He founded Bitzer Mobile, which was created on the heels of 2008 recession and exited in what was Oracle's first acquisition in mobile. Most recently, he led growth at Chargebee, where revenue grew three times. He's an alumni of Pillar Institute of Technology. Welcome to the show, Indus.
Hey, thanks, Rohit. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Before the call, I mentioned you're one of the few founders with whom I've interacted before, and I really hold you in high esteem. But really interested to know what got you into this world of startups, and what was your life story all about? Since you lived in the India before, and now you're here in the US.
Yeah, I think great question. I think the foundational element there is curiosity, is in, hey, I see something new. Hey, can I try it? Or I see a new tech, can I use it to build something? And that remained very foundational as a kid, experimenting with something in the real world to experimenting something now in tech and software. I do not remember how I morphed into, or what was the foundational thought of morphing from just a techie writing code to, hey, let me run this as a business. I was not ready for that, but probably got thrown into that. And my previous startup was in mobile security, where I was not the driver. I happened to know Ali, who was my co-founder, and Naeem, who was the CEO. They were toying with this idea around building a product for mobile devices and securing data. And Ali one fine day said, hey, do you want to work together? And I said, yeah, that's a cool idea. Let's just do it. And three of us started together, and it was just happy accident that I became a founder with Bitzer Mobile, and the startup got acquired. But 2014 to now, that has been a transformational journey where I actually feel that I should start something of my own. The desire becomes much more deeper. Initially, you would land into accidents, happy accidents, or randomness. Somebody else is doing it and you become part of the journey. But once you go through that with someone else, your own desire just strengthens, and you say, hey, this doesn't look like rocket science. I could do this on my own. And I think that's how I became an entrepreneur. I grew up in India, grew up in a mining town called Dhanbad. Of course, it goes down in history books because of the mafia there and the bloodshed, 2 to 3 people, being killed or in homicides on a daily basis because there's so much money and wealth in transportation, shipping, and mining of coal. So I grew up there, and then did my undergrad from Bitzer Institute of Technology, Meshra, and then became a computer scientist, and then odd jobs here and there, and finally landed up in Silicon Valley, the mecca of innovation.
Yeah, no, I think that's super interesting. And since you built startups both in India and US, where do you find the innovation like more? Where do you see the Indian startup ecosystem in the next 10 years?
The Indian startup ecosystem has matured quite a bit. So I was in India. I'll give you an example. I do have numbers in my head. 2008, there were a total of 10 startups that have raised angel money. 10, total 10 angel money in 1 year, 2008. Today, close to 10,000 startups have raised angel money in the last 5-6 years. You could see the magnitude is like growth is 1,000% year over year. And I think the next phase is even more deeper for the Indian startup ecosystem. Of course, there are layers there. What happened that if you compare Indian startup ecosystem to Silicon Valley or the US ecosystem, the overall infrastructure is very mature for you to think in terms of design, problem solving, and doing customer acquisition, where the value of your software is much more than the value of human labor. India is still very much human labor driven economy. So the value of software is not that much. You would be lucky if you would sell a B2B SaaS product and they will look at the ROI. If I could put someone who's going to charge, let's say 10 lakh rupees a year, which is roughly what, $5,000, $4,000 ish. No, sorry. 10 lakh rupees is $20,000-ish a year. They will look at the ROI of your software in terms of human labor. And hence, I think the next 10 years, my bet is it will not be a tech-driven startup ecosystem, but real-world problems-driven. We will see commodities, we'll see food and beverage, we'll see restaurants, we'll see real estate. All of these other non-tech areas will flourish quite dramatically compared to tech because, foundational problems have not been solved. I think there's a lot of opportunity in India in the next 10 years, but I am bullish long-term on India, on tech, but more bullish on non-tech sectors such as mining, manufacturing, agri, commodities, and others.
Yeah, no, absolutely, totally agree with that. You've been part of Chargebee, which is a billing partner for SaaS and subscription-based companies. How did you get that opportunity, and what was the entire experience building Chargebee?
Yeah, this was an interesting phase of my life. So after Bitzer Mobile got done, spent a couple of years at Oracle, and I just did some random gigs here and there, trying to learn more beyond what I knew at Bitzer. I try to figure out how many aspects of customer acquisition is done. One of the areas that always intrigued me is SMB, or small and medium business customer acquisition, which is very organic, very content driven, very referral marketing or word to mouth driven. And I had no idea how this worked. I had no idea how content marketing worked. So when I found out about Chargebee from someone, and when I looked at their business model, which is fintech plus SMB, I just thought I got to get this. I have to become part of this. So luckily, Krish interviewed me and Rajaraman. So Krish is the CEO and founder of Chargebee, and Rajaraman co-founder. So they both interviewed me over a period of 4 months, and then they liked me, and then I went inside. It was just magical what they built. Amazing product, well-loved design, and of course a business model which has a very strong moat. Because if you are somebody selling a recurring service, which is software or consumer, you will not unplug. You need revenue coming in. So, very transformational in my journey in terms of the Chargebee experience.
Interesting. And you work with bigger companies like Oracle. Now, how does one transition, from either a big company to a small company, or from a small company to a big company?
I think I'll sound very cliched, but it is your own ability to adapt to different environment, as in a change that you want to make. And another one is the change that you do not want to make. Is you're naturally very curious. You have high agency in getting things done. You want to pursue whatever innovation or excellence or doing new things, irrespective of where you are. So, which is your growth mindset, your entrepreneurial DNA, that does not go away. So for me, again, at Oracle for 2 years, it was a learning opportunity. I did not know anything about sales. I got lucky to find mentors in sales and product organizations and learned a lot. And when I came to Chargebee, I knew that as a smaller organization, I cannot have the baggage of a large company. I was there to learn. So I adapted and then learned the new things, and whatever my experience was, shared and brought customers using that at Chargebee. I think in the industry, people get labeled very easily that you are a big company guy, you're a small company guy. And unfortunately, it is not true. A person naturally is not a big company person. A person naturally is intellectual, is curious, he's high agency, he's growth minded, that's it. If you can apply from one place to the other, doesn't matter what size of the business it is.
Got it. And you started off at Quolum. Why do you want to build another company?
I think the genesis of this idea came while I was at Chargebee. I saw firsthand how SaaS adoption was going through the roof. If you go back in time, like 10, 15, or 20 years ago, any company would buy software, but it would buy only from 5 or 6 vendors: Oracle, Microsoft, SAP, BMC, Computer Associates. That's it, handful. Fast forward to now, you buy from hundreds of vendors. So I saw this explosion firsthand that the number of software startups or companies actually making a difference were not like 10, 20, or 50, but like 10,000s of them. So that was one inflection point. Second, I saw that companies were not using any tools for buying. All the tools that were being used or made was for selling. So let's say you run a SaaS startup, you are VP of sales, you would acquire at least 15 different tools to help you meet your revenue targets.
Yeah.
Now, imagine me being a buyer of your tool. I don't have any products to evaluate you better, to track your success, to make sure that if your product is not being used, I can downsize and upsize. I'm just running blind on spreadsheets, right? So that combined with the growth of SaaS or explosion kind of gave me this idea that something has to be done, and quit Chargebee in the summer of 2019 and started Quolum.
Got it. And were there other companies also trying to solve the problem? Like Truebill, or was that a competitor?
Truebill is basically what we do, but for the consumer market. So we are a B2B SaaS product. We sell to the enterprises. Truebill is recurring software management or recurring subscription management for consumers. They analyze your credit card data and they tell you, oh, you have 8 subscriptions for watching TV or video on demand, and they'll help you cut down.
Okay, got it. And I want to talk about especially with what happened with Silicon Valley Bank, and it's still a big topic because there are other banks who could face a similar situation like Silicon Valley Bank, but especially for founders, what in your view would be the right way to do scenario planning for startup in a situation like this?
Great question. Very controversial 2 weeks ago when nobody knew what exactly happened, but we kind of now know what happened. It was a self-inflicted wound where the gangrene just opened up for public view. And that basically gave a flavor that this body is going to die. Whereas the wound could have been easily be band-aid and sealed before anybody saw it. I think that was a summary. We all know what happened. They had some missteps. People came to know about it. It became a rumor, fueled across the startup universe, going to go out of business or going to get shut down, and people started withdrawing money. All these bank run or protection against bank run were designed like 100 years ago, where people stood in line to withdraw. Modern bank runs are online. You put a wire, you put an ACH, right? And as a result of that, the collapse happened. SVB itself was not illiquid, as after reading many of these reports, I found out that they had enough money, or they could have managed enough money to give people back. But I think it's the bank run. In terms of scenario planning, I think 2 things that come out: that do not have liquid cash beyond 6 months sitting in your bank account. Even if things go really bad with a bank, you only lose 6 months. I'm not saying you should lose any money in the worst case scenario, but the worst case is you lose 6 months, and then move that money in FDIC insured up to 100%, like treasury bills, corporate deposits, and other instruments that guarantee 100% recovery in terms of in a case of sad demise like this that happened with Silicon Valley Bank. Second is at least have a couple of other banks as a backup. Even if you're not transacting, at least have those bank accounts. I'll tell you what happened with a couple of friends of mine. They knew about this. They wanted to withdraw the money, but where would you withdraw if you do not have a bank account? You can't bring it to your personal bank account. They'll be committing other kinds of suicide, right? And you have to explain later if things do not go as bad. So at least in our case, since we are a fintech as Quolum SaaS spend management, we were lucky that we had 2 or 3 other bank accounts, and then we were able to move money around. But I think that's one scenario, that have 6 months in your core bank, others, various layers of fixed deposits or corporate deposits or treasury-backed deposits, and then have at least a few other bank accounts where you could transact. The SVB scenario is unpredictable. So even if you bank with, let's say, JP Morgan today, you don't know what's behind the scenes at JP Morgan. It could go bust 6 months down the road. We are just consumers. We see the front face, but there's layers of banking regs behind the scenes affecting their business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when it comes to the bank accounts, how much runway would you suggest should be in each of these bank accounts? Like, for example, if you have 3 bank accounts, what suggestion would you have?
I think 6 months of runway is pretty good in a bank account. I would not split up the money to keep in 3 bank accounts. Some banks are becoming very smart. For example, Mercury Bank launched this feature where you bank with Mercury, but your savings or your current account is protected up to $10 million. Now, of course, if you're a large startup with a $10 million monthly burn, that's still very small. But I would say at least, depending on the arrangement, couple of banks or the others, you should have 6 months of runway. If push comes to shove, you are forced to liquidate that, but beyond that 6 months, you have some deposits in CDs or treasury bills or what have you, other instruments where you could liquidate it and get the cash to pay the salaries for next 2 months. I think the immediate and the next couple of payrolls, that becomes important, but 6 months is a good buffer.
Got it. And a lot of VCs had and other founders also given suggestion like a startup should not work with other startup banks. Like you give an example of Mercury, but should startups bank with startup banks as well as with traditional banks, or should they only keep their money with startup banks or with traditional banks?
I would bet on startup banks more than traditional banks any day, because the founders who have started these modern banks, they are in a much better position to ride this. They know about this, and they're working relentlessly behind this. I don't have any shares in Mercury Bank. I kind of know Imad through a common friend, but those guys are innovating on a daily basis, right? So in 48 hours, they launch features which is unheard of. No JP Morgan or Bank of America can launch it in a year.
Yeah.
And these banks are innovating. So I would say, if you really want to protect or have a scenario, then have an alternate arrangement with, let's say, a JP Morgan, where you could keep your illiquid funds there, which you would need, like, say, a week to liquidate. But bank through Mercury or other startup banks. Of course, you have to build that trust. Look at the founder. What's the founder's background? Is he trustworthy? Is he looking to make a quick buck? And which is true not just for a modern bank, but for any startup, even for us, right? So we deal with spend of other companies. If I am not exhibiting trust or I behave like an asshole, nobody's going to put money in my startup, or they will never become my customers. I think that applies across the board, irrespective of whether it's a bank or general SaaS business.
Got it. And this year, looks like there's an impending recession. So what sort of scenario planning should startups do, and what will be the right way to communicate the scenario plans to your stakeholders if the founder is not able to raise the next round of funding?
I think that's a very real possibility that many startups will struggle. I hate to say this, but most founders, 99% of founders, are very optimistic about their next level. And the reason we are founders, because we don't look for plan B, which is a backup of our failure. Most of us are building businesses which are not mom and pop. These are venture, high risk, high reward, create something out of thin air, new technology kind of businesses. And as a result of that, we don't aggressively plan a scenario where if things don't go well, what would happen? And that's a very real case. Rationally speaking, I think 6 months to 12 months of money in the bank is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Let's say US economy probably is already in recession, or maybe in the next quarter, we don't know. But the hope is, if things are as bad as being predicted, we come out of this in next 12 months. There's no guarantee. It could last for 2 years. Recession generally do not last for 2 quarters. Technically they do, but the effects of that last for at least 2 years. We can go back, the post-dot-com recession, post-housing market, 1990, 1992, 80 to 83, all of them were like 2-year super blips that had a 5-year impact. So it's 2 to 3 years technicals, and then 2 to 3 years of recovery. So it's like 4 or 5 years. So even if I have money in the bank for like a year, that's not enough. It's my optimism that's going to take me there, because at least for tech founders, the optimism is software is not going away. Now, there is 8 to 10% growth year over year in IT consumption, 18 to 20% in SaaS consumption. Of course, I as a startup could fail, or I as a founder could fail in this startup, but the long pole is there is still a lot to be done.
Got it. And I want to talk about execution, especially when you're working in startups. How important is speed of execution, and what can startups do to deliberately increase the speed of execution?
I have a slightly contrarian thought on that. Say, I think the speed of execution is mislabeled.
Okay.
It's the speed of execution at the right time. I think you have to be the judge. Is this the right time to push the pedal to go 120 miles an hour, or be cautious? And I'll give you a visual on it. So let's say you're driving through a hairpin bend, which is a 40-degree bend. If you go at 120 miles an hour, your car is going to fly off the hill and fall into the ditch. But if you have a flat land, if you see sunrise, you have 10 miles of visibility, you want to go 120 miles an hour because you're going to speed up and catch up. So the speed of execution is a timing question. Is this the time in my journey of a startup where I'm going to go 120 miles an hour, versus thoughtfully build what you're building and go full scale? And I'm not just giving you this statement, but I'll give you our example. We started in 2019. In our initial discovery with the CFOs are our targets in terms of potential customer. Everybody said, yep, this is interesting. I love that you are solving the spend management problem, but I'm not going to buy this now. And I asked why. I said, hey, there is money. My boss, which is the CEO and the board, is rewarding me for managing revenue, not managing my spend. So if it is not their readiness, me pushing and shoving a product which was not ready at high speed, acquiring salespeople to sell, it'll be burning cash. And maybe I'll acquire a few million in revenue, but I'll burn through faster. Should I be doing that? I did not. Versus 2022 January or March rather, when there was a softness in the tech economy, people were talking about, oh, there's going to be correction in valuations. All of a sudden we found product market fit. That was nothing that we did. We had a product that was being built, features were being ready. There were some beta customers, and all of a sudden customers started asking, hey, can I use this? Sorry, I didn't pick up your phone last time. Can I talk to you? So I think, and when we found that product market fit, we went full speed. Now we have a 5-people sales team. Our revenues have gone up, and we are kind of at the next level of growth. If I had done that 2 years ago, you and I wouldn't be talking about Quolum. We will be talking about my next startup that I'm thinking about.
Got it. And interesting. You talked about urgency when it comes to sales. So I wanted to understand, when you're taking up a meeting with the CFO or with your ICP, how do you generate that sense of urgency so that you could close out more deals? This is me, talking because I'm into sales and business development. But what advice would you give to me if I'm looking to create that sense of urgency?
I think you have to look at 2 or 3 things to triangulate that urgency. What is the macro picture? And for us, for example, at Quolum, the macro picture is There's softness in the tech economy. You have to control your spend. That's number one. Number two, you create urgency. If I was selling a security product, I would say, hey, attack vectors increasing, more and more websites and identities getting compromised. Do you not want to secure it? In our case, we don't use the security as an urgency. We say, hey, more and more SaaS tools in your enterprise, you do not know what you're spending, who's using. Do you not want to see the visualization? And third is look at the overall timing, saying, hey, softness in the economy leading to recession, you'll not have enough money. Do you not want a tool that will give you the answer now rather than waiting for 6 months? Because you've already lost that 6 months of cash that you could get from reducing the spend. So, and then you triangulate. I'll give you one example how we do it, at least from a number of tools. So there are multiple sites that will tell you what tools a company has. So what we do is we take a screenshot. Hey, you have Salesforce, Jira, Figma, and also have Asana, Notion, and say, hey, do you realize that you have 4 duplicate tools doing exactly the same thing? And the CFO would say, how do you know this? I did not know this.
Yeah.
And that creates a sense of urgency. So you have to shock people in a nice, polite way about the facts that present in their org, but they are not aware of.
Okay, that's smart. You've had engineering team as well as sales team. What is the structure for interviewing? For sales reps or the product guys in your team, and how would you really test for grit and curiosity during the interview process?
I think sales interviews are the hardest because, guess, the reason they're successful salespeople because they know how to sell, right?
Yeah.
Kind of obvious. I think I go back in time. I look at what they have done. Were they in sports? Did they run a basketball team? Were they an assistant coach, or did the guy play college football? It doesn't matter what level it is, but was he or she in a team playing and doing something away from the resume? Second, very important point aligning to that is what is in the resume or not on the resume that is not in their line of duty, which is the 9-to-5 job. And that will set your candidate apart. If the guy is only or the gal is only looking for instructions from her boss saying, oh, do this, do that, you found a potential person who could do the job, but not for a startup of 20. Because in a startup of 20 people, job descriptions are amorphous. People could be doing hundreds of things. I may not have time as a founder to give a chat and give direction, have a chat and give directions, but can the person be self-driven? And things that they do outside of their line of duty, which is their daily job, tells you a lot about the person. Same thing, fortunately, is also applicable for engineering. Look at their GitHub repos, look at any awards they have done or they have won because of a project they have done in summer. What naturally excites them? Are they writers beyond writing code? Writers they are doing social media, they're in Quora. So not overly judging them on the quality outside of the line of duty, but effort that he's trying to do so many things. And that's a driver. Grit is slightly hinging to those answers, but it could also be misconstrued as somebody knowing how to fake the resume, because people know that smart recruiters look for these traits, and people can just create a random GitHub project or clone a repository, make a few commits and call it, hey, I did this project, not actually doing anything about it. So you have to be very careful in parsing out, is it grit which has been faked or is it grit which is real? Follow through is also important. Candidates showing up on time, responding to questions that have been sent, offline assignments that have been given, especially for sales.
Yeah.
Have they sent back? Have they done more than what they're asked to do? I think that's how I would triangulate, but not easy for sales, I must tell you.
Got it. And how should a sales team onboarding be structured, especially if it's a sales rep who's getting onboarded? How would you structure their onboarding?
I think that onboarding has to be driven by a product onboarding first. So I'll give you an example. So we onboarded a few team members recently. I spent quite a bit of time telling them about the product, about our story, why we exist, what does the competition do, going to the competition website, scrolling through, letting them collect the objections, getting them to hear the transcripts or recordings of previous calls to customers, having them dial these calls on their own, or sending, like if you are an outbound SDR team, send some of those emails, see what the responses are. So product, and then really hitting the metal on day 2 or day 3 and getting an experience of what it is, getting them to shadow on some of these real customer demos. For example, you and I, let's say we're doing a sales demo, getting the rep to kind of shadow, saying, hey, this is how it works. Right. So from day 2, you want to get them into an action. I think that's what we did.
Okay, got it. And before the call, we talked about AI, and ChatGPT has really been a force in the last few weeks. And do you think AI would replace SaaS products? And you've also come up with a AI SaaS spend tool, but what are your thoughts on AI, and how are you using AI to improve your business?
I think AI is, to a large extent, reduced the drudgery of buying software products. So I'll give you an example. If you're selling software, it's so much hand-to-hand combat. You have to do a demo, respond to an RFP, send a price quote, answer objections, respond to security questionnaire, and then do another set of round with other stakeholders, negotiate on pricing, negotiate on commercials. It takes between 5 to 8% of your revenue to manage that, and then collect payments. And if they're falling behind, send them a collections agency. And it's a pain.
Right.
You'll be very surprised. Same thing repeats on the buyer side. The corollary task of exactly the same thing, sending an RFP response, or questionnaire, or negotiating on pricing. Why can't we automate it? Why can't we make the buying process simpler? Not just buying as in click on the button and check out. There is more to buying before and after. What has been automated is add to cart and pay by card. That's it. The other 2 edges are still virgin. I think there's a lot to be done, and AI would help. In our case, we are trying to experiment with that, at least reduce the friction of buying, reduce the friction of discovery. So we launched this GPT-based chat assistant, which we're calling a spend copilot, or Quolum SaaS spend copilot. It is essentially replacing a website. So you go there and say, hey, what do you guys do? Do you have a job open? Are you SOC 2 compliant? Tell me about your competition. Do you have customers? What's a case study on this? How can I save money? So instead of you trying to go through a minefield of clicks and discovery, where is this content? You just type your intent, it responds. And next level of that is automating the buying experience, saying, oh, I love it. Can I see a demo? And then the demo happens. Okay, can I consummate into a relationship? Okay, a checkout happens. It's much seamless than a hyper designed website trying to suck you into a traditional marketing funnel and then convert you into an opportunity.
Very interesting. And I also found out that you love playing, flying your own plane, which is a single engine Cessna 172. So how did that that hobby start, and you fly quite regularly?
So that hobby started just, every kid ever took an airplane ride, say, hey, I want to sit there. I want to ride this 747 someday. So I think that imagination had always been in the back of my mind. And what happened was in 2018 or 2017, so we moved to this place where I live now, which is like a mile away from a local municipal airport. Oh. And fortunately, my home is in the flying pattern of, a touch and go being done by other pilots. Like every hour, this plane goes by. And one fine day, I just went and took a discovery flight. And then one thing led to the other, and then I became a regular. But more than that, I realized this thing that I am no longer a young 20-something. My muscles, both externally and internally in my gray matter, are kind of getting loosened and fading away. Doing something new, like learning a language or flying a plane, is to keep those muscles invigorated and charged up. And for me, it was a totally out of the world experience just learning that, because you're not driving a car, which, if you, stop on the gas, you just, be on the road, not move. But flying a plane is like a 3D video game. You have to manage the 3 axes of a plane to not let it fall from the sky. So you have to be hyper aware, listening to what the ATC is saying, watching the screen. You have 20 plus instruments that you have to manage every second. And that teaches you something about life. You have to be in the moment. You have to be present. You can't even think about your children on the ground or about your friends elsewhere. You have to just do the flying bit. Out of the world. I love it. That I'm incredibly lucky that I bought a home here and live here, which kind of excited me to go and try it out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's super interesting. And I quickly want to do the top 3. What's your favorite business book?
Very incidentally, I'm reading this book by Danny Meyer, who is the founder and CEO of Shake Shack, which is a fast food chain serving burger, fries, and milkshake. The book is called Setting the Table. It's not here. It's on my nightstand in my bedroom. It's called Setting the Table. Essentially, it's a book about how the restaurant industry works. What does restaurant industry customer service looks like? How customers behave? How do you build a business? After reading a chapter or every chapter, I feel that we in tech are so privileged. We do our mistakes and we can go and correct it. In a restaurant business, there's no second chance. And he tells the story very vividly as a child growing up in a New York neighborhood, New Jersey area, and then building this chain of restaurants, not just one, but he's done it many times over. So that's the book I'm reading right now. Halfway through, amazing read.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll put that in the show notes. And if you could go back in time when you started building Quolum, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
So Quolum sells to the CFO or the CFO's office. Unfortunately, I have a very limited CFO network. I don't know many CFOs. If I have to start Quolum early, again, I would first try to build a network, put myself inside that network, talk to the CFOs, learn how accounting works. We did not even know how accounting works. So if I do again, I'll go back to school for like 3 months, learn some of these basic ropes of how finance works, how accounting works, get myself inducted into a CFO network. That's how I would start again.
Awesome. And do you have any favorite online tool, for example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom?
We can't live without some of these tools. So Gmail, everyday basis. I use Asana for managing my work with other colleagues. We use Slack internally for collaboration, Zoom for video communication. Apple is magical. So now I'm slowly kind of moving to Apple. For example, I use Notes very heavily for taking daily journal entries. I used to use Evernote earlier, but that tool's faded away. It became broken and beyond repair. So moved to Apple Notes app. These are some of my favorites in personal and professional life.
Or we'll put that in the show notes. And what is the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Quolum?
Yeah, I am Indus Khaitan. Google me, find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, connect me there. Quolum is QUOLUM.com. Our AI copilot is Quolum.ai. So try that out.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Thank you, Rohit, for having me. Great chatting with you.